More microorganisms in a teaspoonful of healthy soil than there are people on this planet.
Right.
Yet we don't think about how do those microorganisms eat. What do they need? Home, habitat. And it's the microorganisms that provide the plants with nutrients, that provide us with nutrients.
From barns to big towns, it's the Peter Byck Show, Season 1. When you stand on healthy soil, there's a universe beneath your feet. Want to make sure you never miss an update? Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you can be the first to know when a new episode arrives. Today's guest is Gabe Brown, an insightful farmer and rancher and renowned teacher of regenerative agriculture. I met Gabe and his son Paul when we filmed our short film, Soil Carbon Cowboys, back in 2013. Gabe always lets folks know what he's thinking, and fortunately, people who produce our food around the world are listening. So Gabe Brown, welcome to the Peter Byck Show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
I feel like I've been on the Gabe Brown Show for a long time.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
And here we are at Stimple Creek Ranch in Northern California. You guys are doing the Soil Health Academy workshop. Do you call them workshop or school?
Academy.
Yeah. And so, where were you born and raised?
Born and raised in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Okay, then. At the mouth of the Missouri River?
Not at the mouth, but
close?
Along the Missouri.
And did you go in the river when you were a kid? Did you?
Oh, yeah, we went fishing there all the time.
But you weren't raised as a farmer.
Grew up in town.
Did you have friends that were farmers?
Had an uncle that farmed, yep.
Did you want to farm?
Ever since I was in the 9th grade and took a vocational agriculture class, I was just infatuated. I knew from that moment on I was going to be involved in agriculture. I originally thought I was going to be a teacher.
Okay.
And I actually went to college to be an ag education instructor. But then fate turned and ended up kind of being a poor cattleman, even worse farmer, but I can kind of grow some soil.
There you go. Hey, there you go. So what was it about that 9th grade experience? Do you remember, was it a day? Was it a class? Was it a teacher?
It wasn't a moment. It was just the overall subject matter. I love being outdoors. It was love getting my hands in soil. You know, I really enjoy working with life, with animals. So it was everything. And realized growing up in town, I didn't know anything about that. So it was all new. And one thing about me, I found school extremely easy, boring. It never really challenged me. This kind of did a little bit because I didn't know anything about it.
I gotcha. And that challenge, was that one of the things that made you want to go back to school every day? Like, did that really charge you up when you were a 9th grader, freshman in high school?
That class. The rest of it, not so much.
Not so much?
But it was just easy for me besides that.
What about girls? Did girls ever get you to class?
Not so much.
No?
No. My wife will tell you that there's a story about that. So I first met her when I was a sophomore. We went to the same high school together, and she was sitting across from me, and she was struggling to get a C, and she moved behind me, and all of a sudden she became an A student in that class. So what does that tell you? I might have moved my arm a little bit so she could get... I won't say it, but that was her business.
That's cool. And did you guys date then?
No, we didn't date in high school. We became best friends, and we hung around together a lot. But then when we started college, of course, went to the same college, and it was like, hey, this is foolish. We're together all the time anyway. We might as well date. So, yeah. I thought I was asking her, to go out for supper with me. She thought I was proposing, and it'll be 43 years we've been married this next month.
And that sort of miscommunication's okay? You guys are getting through it?
That's how we get along. I'm never home. We just nod at each other and cross paths once in a while.
She does not go on the road with you, does she?
Never, ever. She does not travel at all. She has never heard me present. Yep.
Wow. And all these years?
All these years, yep.
So you and I met in the summer of 2013. It was a heat wave. I just filmed Neil Dennis. You were hosting, 300, 500 people for hamburgers and grass-fed?
We actually had 800 there.
800. And you said to me, Peter, do you mind if we do the filming after the grass-fed exchange? I don't really feel like filming today when I first got there. I was so grateful because I was tired.
Yeah.
And then when we were filming, everybody was gone, and I was learning how much you're going around the world. You were going around a lot even then talking, but you didn't charge anybody.
Yeah.
And I was getting paid to speak.
I never said I was smart.
But do you remember me saying you might want to consider?
I do remember that. And I was just, they'd throw me an honorarium now and again, but it was getting kind of expensive. My wife was getting a little bit annoyed, but she liked me being away, so she put up with it. But yes, you did. And now we do kind of charge.
I'm glad. Is it working for you? Like going around teaching?
Well, I love teaching. Mm-hmm. I love doing these academies. I don't go speak at conferences much at all anymore.
Okay.
And that's by choice. Time's limited, so where can I make the biggest difference? Mm-hmm. So love to teach, so I do these academies, but I spend the majority of my time now talking to CEOs, heads of sustainability, and you know what I think of that word, and board of directors, bigger picture, how can we change landscapes? How can we change the food system? That's where I focus my time now.
Scale. Well, you're just saying, you know what, I do know what you think about sustainability. What you said to me back when I met you is, why would we want to sustain this? We need to regenerate this.
Yeah, why do we want to sustain a degraded resource? Right. That makes no sense to me. So all these heads of sustainability, they get a little lecture from me right off the bat.
Yeah, and I'm at a school of sustainability, and I've been trying to get them to change the name. Yeah. Haven't gotten there yet.
I always say we need to be regenerative so future generations can have the possibility or the option to be sustainable.
That's a good one. Now, there's another phrase that I use of yours a lot that I just love the simplicity of it. It's about check writing.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what that one is?
And those who know my story know through that my wife and I went through 3 years of hail, a year of drought, very, very rough times. We were $1.5 million in debt right after that. Jeez. And how do you dig out from under that debt? Nobody was going to write me a check for that much. So I learned very quickly that I needed to learn how to sign the back of the check and not the front. And that's how I got out of debt. Signing the back of the check and not the front. And I tell a story, my wife and I went 23 years without going to a movie together. We maybe went out to eat 2 or 3 times a year, maybe at most. We just didn't spend money. Yeah. We couldn't afford to. But, now obviously I can kind of afford to.
So when you had those years of destruction, where you lost your crops, you had to figure out how to farm without spending money. Mm-hmm. Meaning you didn't have the money for fertilizer, you didn't have the money for pesticides and fungicides and herbicides. How did you? There was a fellow, if my memory's right, there was a fellow in South America that you reached out to.
Actually, how I started, I was like, okay, banker's not going to loan me money anymore. I was very fortunate. I had an understanding banker, and due to the livestock we had, I was able to pay him enough interest. Mm-hmm. Also, they didn't have a mortgage on the land, so they couldn't take the land, and I had very little equipment, and I figured, well, it's worth a gamble to see if this guy can make it or not, you know?
Yeah.
So what I did, I started going to the library. I read Thomas Jefferson's journals, because I thought, okay, they didn't have these synthetics back then. Mm-hmm. If he could do it, and then I read Indian Birdwoman's Garden. How are the indigenous peoples doing it along the Missouri River there? Because my ranch is actually only about 10 miles from the river. Mm-hmm. So they were doing it for centuries. I should be able to do it. And I remember reading, this is how old I am, Peter. I had to look up using the Dewey Decimal System, and I mean, that's old. Yeah. Okay. And I remember reading his journals, and he said, well, we were planting clover.
Thomas Jefferson.
Mm-hmm. We were planting clover and hairy vetch and turnips. And I'll never forget, I went to the local co-op, and I asked to buy 50 pounds of turnip seed. Well, they were trying to figure out how many those little packets that is, Nobody had ever ordered 50 pounds of turnip seed, and that got me started. And then at the same time, what was going on, Jay Fear, who was the district conservationist with NRCS there.
Very cool guy.
He took an interest in what I was doing, asked me if I'd run for a seat on the Burleigh County Soil Conservation Board, and we struck up a friendship. And one thing about Jay is, like me, we have a passion for learning. Jay introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Ademir Caligari, and he was from Brazil. And I will never forget how Jay and I were sitting there listening to him. And at that time, he had worked in over 60 countries all over the world, getting farmers to implement cover crops. And I'll never forget Ademir saying, cover crops need to be seeded in multi-species combinations. And I'll never forget, I was sitting ahead of Jay across the aisle, and I turned and looked at him, and he just looked at me, nodded his head. And that next summer, I started growing multi-species covers, and rest is history.
Yeah. So where were you when he was speaking?
We were at No-Till on the Plains in Salina, Kansas.
Okay.
Yep.
So what, do you remember years? Do you remember what year that was?
That would have been in 2006.
No kidding. So then I met you in 2013, so you weren't that far into it when I met you.
The multi-species covers. I was growing some 2- and 3-way combinations prior to that. Realized my disaster years were 95 through 98.
Okay.
And then I got on soil board in 98, and then the learning process started.
Now, you told me once that there was a calendar at the diner in Bismarck where the farmers would eat breakfast, and they were like marking the day you were going to go out of business on the calendar. Is that true?
That is not true.
Okay.
I don't know. I couldn't afford to go to the diner. So how would I know? I think I said that as a joke, but it wouldn't surprise me. Back then, I was the city kid, and all the neighbors were kind of waiting for me to go broke. The ironic thing about it is, those 4 years of disasters, there was one other farmer of my neighbors who had disaster 3 years, and then a number of them had 2 years. But I was the only one with 4.
Interesting.
And, I tell people, God just had to teach me a lesson for another year or two.
Right.
Yeah.
But did they learn anything from those lessons? Did they change at all?
Yeah, just take more crop insurance.
So crop insurance. Now, I went to a no-till on the plains with you, I think it was 2014, because John Lundgren was speaking at that one. It was right after the science team got together for this big project. Okay. And you let me show Soil Carbon Cowboys. It wasn't on the agenda, but you just sort of made that happen.
Yeah.
And I remember you sitting across from a farmer, and I think you called crop insurance welfare.
Yep.
Would you have said that?
Yes, I would have said that. And I don't adhere to that. What you're saying, no shame, no blame. I don't adhere to that at all. I'm a terrible person.
So talk about why you think crop insurance is welfare. Make that case.
Yeah. If you look at what has driven us down this path, and by that I'm talking about agriculture as a whole, it is the desire to put a large quantity of, I would say food, but I believe it's food-like substances. I don't think what we're producing is food anymore, by and large.
Oh, man.
So what that has driven is policymakers wanted to ensure that there's copious amounts of these food-like substances available.
Right.
One way to do that is to give farmers a quote-unquote safety net, as they like to call it. Well, it isn't a safety net anymore. It's called revenue insurance. A farmer, using historical average for past production, can prove their yields. Then every year they can purchase crop insurance from the federal government subsidized by the federal government, that guarantees a certain level of production at a price that the government sets. And that price is based off the last year's production. Now, the dirty little secret that the consumer doesn't know is the American U.S. taxpayer is subsidizing approximately 2/3 the cost of that insurance. So what I say to people is, okay, are we subsidizing the insurance for Ma and Pa's restaurant on Main Street? Are we subsidizing the insurance for someone's vehicle? A consumer who lives in town? No. Then why should we be subsidizing farmer and rancher's insurance? And then think of what that does, though. That farmer then, when they go decide what crop to plant, a large percentage of farmers in this country have to borrow large amounts of operating capital in order to purchase the inputs.
So they borrow at the beginning of the season?
They borrow it at the beginning of the season.
Pay it back at the end?
But that banker, that lending institution is going to say, okay, we know you can have X amount to this revenue insurance. See, farmers are guaranteed that, whether they go in a field, plant a crop or not. Now, technically, they're supposed to plant one, but whether they use regenerative practices or not, they're guaranteed this. Well, what has that done? Farmers then are going to say, okay, which of these crops it will give me the greatest revenue insurance? That's what I'm going to do. What has that done? It's driven the overproduction of corn, wheat, soy, cotton, many of these major crops.
Yep.
What has that done to price then? More supply, you drive the price lower and lower. So these farmers become a hamster on a wheel.
And the debt is a huge problem in farming, is it not?
Debt is a tremendous problem in farming. The farmers, it's a very capital intensive business. Farmers are the only one who put the majority, in most cases, the majority of their equity, they gamble it every year.
Every year.
Now you'll say, oh, it's not a gamble because of revenue insurance. And that's true for those certain crops.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Hi, everyone. It's Peter. If you like what you're hearing and want to learn more, please check out our docuseries, Roots So Deep, You Can See the Devil Down There. It's streaming at rootssodeep.org. Welcome back to the show. From my understanding, cattle don't get any kind of crop subsidy. There's no cattle subsidy.
Wrong.
Okay.
Wrong. There is now.
Oh, there is now.
Yeah,
okay.
The government started subsidizing that too because cattlemen's groups are saying, hey, that's not fair. We need something. So they have things such as rainfall insurance. Okay? You're gambling. And this is an interesting story. So this shows you the level that this hypocrisy has come to. I know of cattlemen out there who actually, now there's a play, you rent government lands based on paying so much per animal unit month. So one cow, calf, pair for a month, okay? But the rainfall insurance is based on per acre, okay? Well, on a lot of these large government, whether it's Forest Service land or BLM land, what's happening is there'd be low producing lands and they kind of put those out on a bid type deal for a period of time. They don't bring a lot of money, okay? Because it might take you 30 or 40 acres, 50 acres for one cow.
Yeah.
Okay? They take out revenue insurance, they take out rainfall insurance, collect on that by the acre, they're making hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. They don't even have to put the cattle out there. Now, if it's lower than normal rainfall. But in those drier environments, because of desertification, because of poor practices, rains don't come.
Right.
So they're just collecting money. And I know of ranchers are becoming millionaires doing that.
From rainfall insurance?
From rainfall insurance.
Wow.
Yep.
And we're paying that too?
The consumer, the United States citizens who pay taxes are paying for that.
It's not the rich people, just everybody else.
Yeah. So that's why people like me, and I'm very upfront with people, I did not have hail insurance, crop insurance back in those early years, but once I lost a crop, then we started taking it. Back then it didn't pay near as much. But as soon as I started making money, got the debt paid off, learned about these principles and rules and processes, I haven't taken insurance in years. And I'm proud to say my son, who's 37 and has the ranch now, has never taken it. He has never taken one penny of government subsidies.
I don't feel it's bad for like a young industry to take in subsidy to sort of grow. But after a while, people don't like to let that go after
they don't want to let it go.
Yeah. So there's just been a recent ruling, it hasn't taken effect yet, that there was a whole issue with labeling meat grown in other countries as a product of the U.S. Can you talk about what it was before 2015, and then that rule shows up, and all the implications?
Well, it was called country of origin labeling.
Right.
And any meat sold in the United States that was imported had to have that country of origin on it. But then, due to National Cattlemen's Beef Association and lobbyists, that changed. And it became, as long as it was, they added processing in the United States, they could label it as product of the USA. So all they simply had to do, any meat coming in had to be inspected. They don't have to do much to it. Just cut it up, grind it, fabricate it a little bit.
Put it in a box.
It's a product of the USA. The majority of meat, and I don't know this, you'll have to look up this fact, but a lot of the beef products and other animal products that are now sold in the United States are not a product of the United States. They were not grown and raised here.
So that puts you in competition with countries that could grow the meat a lot cheaper and still, what's the negative for you as a producer, for Will Harris as a producer, for...
Yeah, and then the negative is that it's not a level playing field.
Right.
You know, they don't have many of the rules, regulations that we have. Their labor costs are much lower. Right. Processing costs are much lower. And so they have much lower price point than we do.
And so that meat can come in here, undercut everybody here. So there's been a new ruling just recently about this. Are you up on that?
No.
Oh, you're not?
No.
Oh, okay. They're retracting it.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah. It's supposed to take effect in 2026, I think.
But that's why I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I got to see it first.
I got you. So as you travel around the United States and around the world, where do you see the best regenerative practices happening right now? Is there an area, or is it just one person?
You see regeneration when you have the network of individuals.
Okay.
You know, I told you
community.
About the community. I was blessed. I had Jay Fear. I learned along with him. We brought in a few other farmers. We got our soil district started putting on workshops. And so we had a community there. I was blessed to have that. No matter where I travel around the world, you see the same thing. You have these network of individuals, organizations that are making a difference. I can't say there's one country over another. You know, spent quite a bit of time, Alan and I, the last couple years, England, Ireland. It's all a shithole. I'm sorry, it is. It just is. No matter where I go, it is.
So for the most part, you're seeing degraded land everywhere.
Yep.
Do you think that this can be flipped around?
I often get asked that question, Gabe, what gives you hope? I said, hope is, look, when Soil Carbon Cowboys came out, you never heard the word regenerative. You didn't hear regeneration. When we started understanding ag 6+ years ago, few people were talking regeneration. Now we're actively consulting on over 34 million acres, you know, and it's not just us, it's you, it's the whole regenerative community. I tell people the snowball's finally starting to roll downhill.
You are feeling that?
Oh yeah, and I contend, and Al and I just talked about this, we've seen more positive change the last 3 years than we did the previous 25 combined.
Okay, well that's
I really think so, yep. Because I'm seeing it in businesses, I'm seeing it in communities, you know. They're talking, and look at the academy we're at here this week. There's a number of people who they're landscape designers, and they're fighting the monoculture lawns, and you know, that's a good thing. We all need to do our part.
Do you ever consult with the USDA? Do you talk to the secretary of the USDA?
Yeah, if you want a lesson in futility, go talk to the government. You know, I testified in front of the House Ag Committee there, and it's just so frustrating, because to me, I don't care if you're left or right or somewhere in the middle, you can be regenerative.
Right.
But according to them, they got to have their own wordings. And I'm like, you fools. I call it common ground for common good. Okay, now most farmers, as you know, Peter, won't talk about climate change.
Right.
No, but some know about soil organic matter and carbon.
Right.
Okay, let's talk there.
Yep.
We all want clean air, clean water. You know, we want water quality, quantity. We want to revitalize our rural communities. Those of us in farming and ranching want to make a profit. Most importantly for me lately is the human health aspect.
Yeah.
You know, we need nutrient-dense food. What I'm saying, I don't care where your interest lies. Regenerative agriculture can address part of those interests. So why can't we come together, left side of the aisle, right side, common ground, common good?
Yeah.
Human beings, we should be able to agree on 85, 90% of the issues. Don't worry about the 10, 15%. If we agree on the other 85, we're going to get along just fine.
If you win an election by 58 to 42% in this country, you've got a landslide.
Oh, a landslide.
So if we can get 6 out of 10, we're doing pretty good.
Yep.
We're doing pretty good. So when you say common ground, when we were filming Roots So Deep, I was kind of coming to the conclusion that the common ground is actually the ground.
The common ground is the soil.
It's the soil. Everyone I've met who I talk to about soil health, they like it.
Yep.
I haven't met anyone that's like, ooh,
Yep.
that doesn't sound like a good idea.
No, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah.
You know, look where we are. We're here in Northern California. The erosion we're seeing on perennial pastures because of overgrazing, understocking. You know, we're seeing it. And that's been the discussion the last 3 days. Yeah. We can't have that. We go into the northern Great Plains where I'm at. We see soil erosion, wind erosion. Can't have that, you know.
Have you ever read The Grapes of Wrath?
I have.
Have you read it since you've become focused on regenerative?
No.
If you get the time, I read it a few years ago.
Yeah, that'll happen. Is it available on Audible? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
Probably is.
Probably really good, whoever read it. But it's in California during the Dust Bowl years, and you can see all the problems at the beginning.
Yeah.
You can see all the agricultural bad decisions and the results and the flooding and the destruction.
And how have we done since then?
You tell me. It doesn't seem to be so good.
I tell people, you know, I'm on hundreds, if not thousands of farms and ranches, and I have never, ever been on a single one, including my own, that's not degraded. You know, I'm still farming a degraded resource. We've got to change this, and we've got to change it now.
We'll be right back. Enjoying the conversation? Well, you'll love our new 4-part docuseries, Roots So Deep, You Can See the Devil Down There, which is all about inventive farmers and maverick scientists building a path to soil health and farmer wealth with hooves, heart, and soil. It took us 10 years to make, and you can binge the whole story in an evening. It's streaming now at rootsodeep.org, and use the code GABE, G-A-B-E, for 10% off. Welcome back. So, what do you think of the generation that's coming up now? Do you see it growing? Interest in regenerative agriculture, not just eating the food, but being a producer?
Yes and yes. I spent last week at Expo West.
Right.
70,000 attendees, 3,100 booths, and it was talking about Gen Z.
Right.
And how they're becoming consumers and where their mindset is. And they're a lot more in tune. And so from a human health aspect, the importance of sourcing nutrient-dense, regeneratively grown and raised food, I think they're much more in tune. But I think there also is a real desire for a lot of them to get back to the land. I'll never forget a quote in Masanabu's book.
Is that the One Straw Revolution?
That's the Masanabu's book, The One Straw Revolution, where he said, the fertility of the land is directly proportional to the number of footsteps on that land.
Interesting.
And his whole thought is you have to be able to observe and read what that land is telling you. And of course, that's a big belief of many of ours that, you know, I always tell the story, and again, no shame, no blame here, but my neighbors, 40,000 cropland acres, and I have never, ever, not once. They've been farming there. I've been on that place since 1983, okay? 40 years. I have never once seen them stick a spade, a shovel in the soil, and look at the soil and try and see what that soil is trying to tell them.
Yeah.
Now, I've stuck a spade in their soil thousands of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been with you.
A few times with you.
Yeah. I tell you about that whole idea of soil and what do you know and what do you get and who knows about it.
Yeah.
When in 2015 we were doing sort of pre-research up in Alberta on what we then became the Roots So Deep research in the Southeast U.S. We actually came through your all's operation on the way back, came through Neil's operation on the way back. And we were doing work on a ranch, the Hovens. I don't know if you know them, but the dad was the first organic farmer in Canada, certainly one of the first. One of the first to do anything regenerative with grazing, right? So they're thinking about it.
Yep.
And their son, who we were working with, who was probably 42 or something, big guy, cool, super nice guy. We were with him, we dug a meter-long core sample and placed it in front of him. And he had never seen his soil before, even the folks who were so far ahead of the game. And it just showed me how it's just
disconnected.
People just don't think about their soil when it's their livelihood, but they don't know it's their livelihood.
More microorganisms in a teaspoonful of healthy soil than there are people on this planet.
Right.
Yet we don't think about how do those microorganisms eat? What do they need? Home, habitat. And it's the microorganisms that provide the plants with nutrients that provide us with nutrients.
And so when you think of providing us with nutrients, you're saying that health is something that's on your mind right now. Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I have ALS, and that comes about from the years, I believe it comes about from the years that I farm conventionally, exposure to chemicals, and then realize as a consultant I walk on a lot of farms, ranches that use chemicals, and it's toxicity.
So it's a hazardous job to consult on chemical farms.
It is.
I've always wondered why it's called conventional. I just think it should be called chemical.
Yeah.
Let's be specific about that.
Well, but it isn't just the chemicals, though, Peter. Tillage, you can say the same thing, because tillage is very destructive also.
Right.
And you're destroying soil life with that. So, I would agree. I think there's other terms, I think, to be quite honest with you, I think what we're doing, even though it's called regenerative, should be conventional, because we're just farming and ranching in synchrony with nature.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's why I would separate and say chemical here, conventional, working with nature. So ALS, you have ALS. When were you diagnosed?
2 years ago this month.
And were you having symptoms that made you go to the doctor?
Yeah, I could tell. I'd get up in the morning and I have to think to get my legs to move. I could tell things just weren't. And this is kind of a tough subject, because I did this all unbeknownst to my wife, and I kept it a secret from her for 6 or 8 months, and from my family, because I just didn't want to worry them anymore, And they found out, and they weren't too happy with me, and still aren't, but that's okay.
Yeah. And so what are you doing now to be proactive?
Yeah, so I'm working with Dr. Mark Hyman. He's got me on a supplement regime. I refuse to take drugs, so it's simply, all natural, supplements. And I have to say, I feel good. I feel real good. So I can still tell things aren't right, but as long as I feel like this, they gave me 2 to 4 years. Well, 2 years is now, and so I'm betting on me.
You heard 2 to 4 years? That's what they said to you?
That's what they said. That's the average lifespan when you're diagnosed, 2 to 4 years.
My aunt was given 3 or 4 years in 1970.
Yeah?
And when did she die? Like 2012, 2013?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Not with ALS, but with other stuff. So they don't know.
Yeah, they don't know. I'm betting on me.
I'm betting on you,
pretty
too.
stubborn. Yeah.
I'm glad about that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're stubborn, because that's good. So what's happening on your farm? Like, you're on the road all the time, so you're not running the show anymore.
No, I had promised, and I remember back when our son Paul was in college, I had, promised him that I knew he was going to return to the farm, be a rancher. There was never any doubt. But I didn't want him to have to worry, okay, will this ranch be mine someday? What's going to happen? And we have a daughter also. We talked to her. She had no interest in coming back to the ranch. So we actually put the land in a trust, and Paul is both the executor and beneficiary of that trust. So he knew that land was going to be his. And I promised him, Paul, when you're 30, I'm going to step back. And that's when he took over more and more management. Ellen and I started understanding ag, and that got me away. So I tell people I'm on a need-to-know basis now on the ranch, and Paul thinks that I don't need to know. So he asked me the question about, why I'm interested in human health, and talked about my ALS. I was actually interested in human health prior to that.
Yeah.
Because I saw what's happening, the increase in ADD, ADHD, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, autoimmune diseases. Diabetes. You just see it running rampant throughout societies, especially here in the United States and that. And so I knew, knowing what I know about soil, I knew that was the root cause was the degradation of our soils.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And when we were talking about Paul running your ranch now, running the show, do you see things he's doing? You're like, but you keep your mouth shut?
As best as Dad can. Yeah, I do. I try and think back into what it was like when my wife and I took over the ranch from her parents, and I'm like, I just gotta bite my tongue. And I'm on the road so much. I don't get out there that often, and I try and oftentimes go out there when he's not home, just so there isn't a little confrontation, maybe. But I'm still very proud. I mean, what he's doing with the direct marketing and pastured proteins, and him and Jazz are doing a great job.
What's the name of the produce?
Their business is called Nourished by Nature.
Nourished by Nature.
Yep.
You and Paul and I were at a Quivira conference.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to say 2014. The three of us went to go look at a co-op. I guess I had a rental car and say, hey, I'll give you a ride. And we're in a co-op, and the guy who's watering the produce just gave me and you a piece of wisdom that I've kept ever since. And he said, a lot of people think this produce is expensive. My family thinks this produce is expensive. But I say, look at your healthcare costs, and if you put them all in one bucket, this produce isn't so expensive. And that changed my outlook about everything, that guy at that co-op shop.
Let thy food be thy medicine.
Yeah.
Yep.
And save you money.
Yep. And we don't think of that in society today. All I hear about, regenerative, the food is more expensive. In the United States and many parts of the world, we just look at food as an expense. We don't look at it that it actually can be used as preventative medicine and should be used as preventative medicine.
Right.
And if you look at the cost of healthcare today, I mean, those costs are exorbitant, okay?
Yeah.
Then you look at what we're paying for food, food's cheap.
Right.
And quite frankly, using these regenerative practices, we can actually grow and raise food at a lower price point, okay? But in saying that, I'm a capitalist, I'm going to make money where I can.
Right.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with charging an appropriate amount for nutrient-dense food.
Let's just talk about beef for a second, because it seems to be cheaper for a farmer to raise cattle on their land, beef cattle on their land, if they're not spending money on inputs and all the other things. And then it gets expensive when it gets to processing, because there's just so few processors around. Is that still the case? Are we still in that situation?
Yeah, farms, ranches that are using regenerative practices can produce whatever they're producing, beef in this case, at a much lower price point.
Yeah.
That's true. The bottleneck becomes the cost to process, simply because there's not enough processors anymore.
Right.
And economies of scale. Labor costs have gone up significantly, just the overhead of the equipment, etc. You almost have to be doing a processor needs the ability to process at least a semi-load, which is 40 to 43 head every day, and they got to do that 51 weeks out of the year at least, in order to really be competitive.
Got it. We'll be right back. Please check out our new docuseries, Roots So Deep You Can See the Devil Down There, which explores how adaptive multi-paddock grazing is turning cows into climate heroes. It's available now for streaming at rootsodeep.org. Welcome back to the show. What about consumers? What's the power of the dollar? When I met you in 2013, that's what you thought was going to be the biggest driver towards regenerative agriculture.
I thought that. I still believe that. I think right now we're seeing some things happen, some nutrient density testing phytochemical compounds that are really proven that food grown in and on healthy soils has more of these phytochemical compounds. That's all a good thing. Mm-hmm. I think
that's basically plant chemicals, phyto, plant.
Yep.
Okay.
But it transfers on to the animal too that consumes that plant. So that's a good thing. And I think as we get more and more data and consumers learn and are educated about that data, then they can make change via their buying dollar. Yeah. So what's next for you, Peter?
I want to get the knowledge of that soil health is a goal and it's doable and through our films to as many farmers as possible.
Great.
And then hire you guys to teach the farmers who want to learn. And then figure out if we can raise some impact investment so that transition cost, ranch transition finance is what we're calling it, so that, if you got to put water points in, if you have to put a perimeter fence, right? If you need to get a different type of animal to grass finish rather than grain finish and all that stuff. And then just keep doing this research. Keep doing the research because we want a honest carbon market to exist, an honest water ecosystem services market where water and wildlife and all those things. And the only way you're going to get true honesty in that market, which it's not quite there right now, is to do a lot more research so the measurement and verification costs just get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
Yep.
And I've actually thought the way you guys are working with Regenified, or you've started Regenified to sort of bring in a verification badge that you trust. I'm thinking you guys might have to help start a carbon market too.
Well,
that you trust.
And that may be, the reason we started Regenified is because all the greenwashing that's taken place. You're hearing a lot of individuals, organizations, companies using the word they're regenerative.
Yeah.
But boy, in our minds, they're far from it.
Right.
In our minds, it all goes back to the principles, rules, and processes. And they take place everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Yep.
Principles, rules, and processes. You want to list those out for us?
Yeah. So it's all about the 4 ecosystem processes. The energy cycle, which is sunlight, the water cycle, the nutrient cycle, and community dynamics or biodiversity. Well, those 4 ecosystem processes take place everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, they're driven by the 6 principles of soil health, which is context. You have to know your context.
Meaning like where you are.
Where you are, yeah. Like I tell people there's a reason bananas don't grow in North Dakota, right? We kind of get a little cool up there. Yeah. There's a reason you shouldn't be calving in the middle of winter in North Dakota, right? The deer don't drop their fawns in the middle of winter there. You have to take context into account.
Although that was conventional for a long time.
And it still is for a long time.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
Yep. The other principles are least amount of disturbance, whether we're talking tillage. Tillage is way overused. We shouldn't be tilling the soil. Chemical disturbance, fungicides, pesticides, etc. We have to minimize or eliminate those disturbances. Third principle is armor on the soil. You should never see bare soil.
Yeah.
Walk out into a native forest, walk out into a diverse prairie ecosystem, you're not going to see bare soil. Then it's diversity. Biodiversity again, plants, animals, insects. We need that. Leaving root in the soil as long as possible throughout the year to drive that energy cycle, collect sunlight via photosynthesis. And then the last one is animal and insect integration. You have to integrate animals and insects. And then as far as the rules, we have the rule of disruption. Right. You have to disrupt things, and by that I don't mean tillage. You have to disrupt things in order to cause change.
Right.
Rule of compounding, which is for every single thing a farmer or rancher does, there's either positive or negative compounding effects.
Back to disruption in the productive way you just described, that's like not doing the same thing all the time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And Alan always equates it to someone in training for the Olympics.
Right.
You're not going to lift the same amount of weights every day when you're in training. You got to vary it. You got to have that disruption.
Yeah.
Rule of compounding, nothing is ever neutral. It's either positive or negative. And everything we do in agriculture has multiple, either compounding or cascading events.
Uh-huh.
And then the final rule is that of diversity.
Yeah.
Again, diversity is all three.
Well, compounding, you have a diverse forage, bringing in diverse insects, which then brings in diverse birds. And just by that forage being diverse, now you've got incredible bird diversity,
Yep.
and you also have microbial diversity.
Exactly.
Those bing, 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 bing.
And they have that diversity as diverse different types of roots,
Yep.
different rooting depths. I mean, it's all just positive, positive, positive.
Yeah. So you know a little bit about this stuff.
I made it a little bit. I listen
You just
to
have a good
Alan
memory.
enough.
You listen to Alan enough.
Listen to Alan enough.
I got you there.
Yeah. Don't tell him that I get
No,
a
of course
compliment.
not. He'll never see this. He doesn't watch this stuff. He just acts like he does.
Yeah. I tell people I just make this shit up.
So as we're going to wind this down, I just want to let you know that meeting you and having you in my life, the education I've gotten from you, the ability to film you and include you in our stories, the ability to have people watch our stuff that we've made. God, it's just given my life purpose,
Well,
and it feels good. Doesn't mean every day is great. I mean, there's all sorts of conflicts and struggles to get this stuff really going. But I just want to thank you.
Well,
I want to thank you, Gabe.
thank you. I'll thank you. I tell everyone, Soil Carbon Cowboys put me on a whole nother level.
It did.
It did.
That's awesome.
That's about all the longer my attention span is
12 minutes.
12 minutes, But in saying that, and realize only a small part of that was me, but it really, for the first time, brought a number of us who are going down the same path, so to speak, together.
Nice.
And I really appreciate that.
Will Harris is in competition with you all the time. And
He thinks so, but he's not really competition.
so after I made the film on him, 100,000 Beating Hearts, he kept asking me how the numbers were. Are we going to catch up to Soil Carbon Cowboys? And he never did.
Yeah.
But he did win a couple of awards.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you got the eyeballs, he's got the hardware.
Yeah, but I got the good looks too. He doesn't.
Where did you guys meet?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to ask
Will
that.
Harris actually and I, the first time we met face to face was in, I'm going to get the name of the town, Columbus, Nebraska.
Okay.
I believe that's town. Yeah, at a grass-fed exchange. That would have been the year before it was at my place.
So 2012.
2012.
Okay.
That's the first time we met. I'm sitting back there listening to this guy, and I'm like, man, he's making a lot of sense, And then he listened to me, and
Thought the same
and
thing.
then he wanted to be like me. No.
Be like Gabe. So thank you for being on the Peter Byck Show.
Well,
It's
thank
crazy
you.
to even say that. That's awesome.
Well, thanks, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we'll see you again.
Yeah. Let's go eat steak.
Help spread the word. Subscribing and hitting the bell lets the platform know you value these conversations and helps us share new stories and new science with the world. Thank you all for watching. Gabe always advises farmers to work with nature, not against her. He's also a force of nature himself. To see our docuseries Roots So Deep, you can see the devil down there. Join us at rootsodeep.org and use the code GABE, G-A-B-E, for 10% off. You can read our published research and other folks' research on regenerative agriculture at rootsodeep.org under the tab Research. If you would be so kind, please tell one other person about our show. To let us know your feedback, questions, and comments, please email me at peter@rootsodeep.org. And to follow us on social, our handle across the board is @CarbonCowboys. This is Peter Byck for The Peter Byck Show. Be well and be kind.